Hi everyone! In this video we will discuss the research project, which is writing assignment 4 and writing assignment 5, and some tips on choosing a topic. Another video you'll watch later in the week will go over how to use the library website to find your sources. So to start, before watching, you should have reviewed the 2 prompts on Canvas. They're linked to under modules and also on the online work due this week, listed depending on which class you're in. If you haven't, please pause the video and pull those 2 pages up. Make sure you can review them before watching the video. Now, before we get started, I want to acknowledge that even during normal semesters, which this clearly is not, students can get easily overwhelmed when they hear a research project. And I want you to know from day one that this assignment is doable, even in an online environment with everything else going on. All you have to do is choose a topic, find some sources, and then write a paper. The main difference between the research project and previous essays we've written is just that you find your own articles. That's it. That's the only difference with the research paper. Previously, I've given you the articles. Now, you'll just find them yourself. But of course, I'm available for help. If you're in 108, Eve is available. And of course, the library as well. So we have the rest of the semester solely dedicated to this project, so you have plenty of time, and it's definitely doable. So here's a brief overview, which you should already know from reviewing those prompts. There are 2 parts to the project, and that's why I call it a project, because there's basically 2 different prompts. First is writing assignment 4, which is just a list of sources. You should find around 8 sources, and you will turn in a works cited with those sources listed, and each source gets a short paragraph. This is called an annotated bibliography, and it's not a traditional essay. Here's a sample. So as you can see, it's a works cited entry at the top where it says MLA citation. And then there's 3 paragraphs, just needs to be 1 to 2 paragraphs that describe the source and talk about how you might use it in your essay. And there's questions in the prompt that tell you what to write about in those paragraphs. So you will do this, the citation in those paragraphs, 8 times. And that is writing assignment 4. There's no other writing or essay component to it. The second step is to write the paper, and that is a traditional-ish essay. So it's a problem solution research paper, and it's the same topic as writing assignment 4, the list of sources. And you want to use the same sources. So after you gather those sources, you wrote writing assignment 4, you've read the sources, you're thinking about the topic, then you'll write an essay exploring the group and the discrimination they face in more detail. So I really want to underscore that these are on the same topic and they use the same sources. Of course, if you want to swap any out, it's your choice, but you're not expected to find all new sources for writing assignment 5. So sample research papers for writing assignment 5 are posted to Canvas if you want to review them now. Here's the prompt copied from Canvas. As you can see in the top left corner, I've identified different steps in this process. And the first step is to choose a group. So you need to choose a group that's been historically marginalized. That is what you'll be researching and writing about for both writing assignment 4 and writing assignment 5. Which group you choose is mainly up to you. I will definitely provide guidance, and I may recommend that you switch groups. This is not because you chose bad or it's a bad group. It's just because based on my experience with this essay prompt and with students writing this paper, some groups lend themselves to the paper better than others, and I want you to have a smooth and easy experience. So take a second and brainstorm. What does marginalize mean? Normally, we'd brainstorm together as a class, but here I've kind of done it for you. So marginalized means off to the side. If you're in the margins, you're not in the center. So a synonym could be oppressed. If you look it up on Google, it'll say marginalized means to be treated as insignificant, to be excluded, to be on the fringe of society or seen as less important than other groups. So you need to choose a group that's been historically oppressed or marginalized. So we'll look at some samples that fit within that. But think about, what are some groups that have been marginalized? Pause the video and I encourage you to write down on a piece of paper or just think through some groups that are coming to mind that have been marginalized or historically oppressed. I'd love to hear what you came up with. So in your next discussion post, make sure to list a few groups you're considering. All right, like I said, the first big choice you have to make is which group to focus on. To be honest, don't be like Larry David and spend too much time hemming and hawing over finding the perfect group. If you're really not sure, reach out, or you can just pick one from the sample list if you're unsure. I want you to, of course, think about which group and choose a group you want to research, but I don't want you to be spending too much time really going back and forth. Once you have some ideas, my suggestion is to consider narrowing them, especially if it's a race-based group. So for example, if you want to look at the African American community, you have to define that further. It is way too much for you to write a paper on discrimination towards African Americans in general. You would really have a hard time. Defining it, narrowing it, will make it easier to write the paper. That's same with other groups like women or, like I said, other race-based groups. Here are some sample topics and groups from previous semesters that have been successful. I say successful to mean that the student was able to find a good amount of sources without it being too overwhelming, and they were able to produce a strong paper given the prompt. You do not need to choose a group that you identify with. So if you have a mental illness, you do not have to choose people with mental illness, for example, though you can if you want. Either way, though, I do encourage you to choose a group you don't know a lot about, so you're not just confirming your beliefs. Research is about learning and exploring, and it works best when you can go in with an open mind. Therefore, I recommend choosing a group you don't know a lot about. So feel free to pause this and look at some of those sample topics from previous semesters. Now the next step, see we're on step 2, is some preliminary research and brainstorming to just make sure the topic is a good fit. You want to think through the topic before you fully commit to starting researching, to starting to do research. So that will look like doing some brainstorming on your own and doing some preliminary research on Google. So here's a picture. It's a little hard to see, but it's a brainstorm that I did in a 108 class last year. So you can see the groups at the top. There's Jewish Americans, drug users, African American men, ex-cons, and then Native American women got cut off, so you can't really see those. So pause the video and read through these. And what I want you to see is how we brainstormed different ways these groups experience discrimination and different solutions to combat that discrimination. So this is the core of the essay, so I'm going to put that on the screen here. You will be researching the discrimination this group faces and then ways to avoid or combat that discrimination. So I'm just going to walk through Jewish Americans here. Some of the ways the group experienced discrimination: someone wrote down the Holocaust and Nazis, and specifically the re-emergence of white nationalism, of course anti-Semitism, and then some solutions. Well, they jotted down museums or memorials or perhaps awareness. These are just brainstorms. These students have not started researching yet. Same with drug users. So we have workplace discrimination, so requiring drug tests. I think they're focusing on cannabis use. Neglected by government. We also have stereotyping. That's a common form of discrimination. Not receiving resources and the criminalization of certain drugs. Now, solutions, they have ending the drug war. That's a pretty big one. But they also have funding for treatment centers, and again, awareness is a really common solution, just increasing awareness about people who use drugs. We also have African American men, and I'm going to combine this with ex-cons. Some of the ways they experience discrimination are stereotypes or prison types, which is a stereotype. For ex-cons, they can't vote. That's a huge form of discrimination, or at least in some states. And it's difficult to get a job or housing. For ex-cons and for African American men, they may be more likely to be stereotyped or targeted by law enforcement. Now, for solutions, for African American men, perhaps coming up with programs to find jobs. For ex-cons, it's kind of the same thing, but passing laws that let them vote, awareness, things like that. So this is the heart and soul of the paper, the way the group experiences discrimination and then different approaches to combat that discrimination. So definitely pause and think through your topic in these two categories to make sure there's at least some things that are coming to mind. Now, the next step, well, this is still the same step, but the next stage of this step is to do some research on Google. So think through those two categories, but then feel free to go onto Google and research this group. The reason why you want to do this is to make sure there's enough being said about this group and to give you a little bit more information to help inform your researching. So see what's being said about Native American women or ex-convicts or whatever you decide. You want to choose a topic that has enough being said about it, where there's sources, but not too much where it's overwhelming, and not something that's too recent. So I could see in a few years maybe people who have COVID-19 or who have the coronavirus are probably experiencing discrimination. Obviously, there's been a lot of discrimination against Asian Americans or those with Asian descent. But it's too recent to be able to have like thorough research that we need for this essay. So step 2, log on to Google on your own and just kind of see what's being said out there. Next, develop that preliminary research and the brainstorming you did to continue gathering information so that you can reevaluate the topic. If you want to switch your topic, you want to switch now rather than later. So this brainstorming and preliminary research step is really important so that you can commit to the group that you're going to be researching, and you don't kind of commit to it and then decide in a few weeks, wait a second, I really don't want to research this. So really use this time to reevaluate and think about whether the topic is in accordance with the prompt question, meaning it's actually responding to writing assignment 5. So make sure to review that at this stage. And then number 2, based on what you found in the preliminary research and based on brainstorming it for a bit, are you still interested enough in this topic, as we're going to be talking about it and researching it for the whole semester? That takes us to step 3, after we've really thought about the topic and kind of committed to it, which is to start researching. Don't hesitate to dive into the research. You will watch another video later on how to find sources to get you started. But as you're researching, remember to look at different angles for this group. We're going to talk about hopefully different search terms to use to help you find sources. And my number 1 tip for now is just not to hold out for the perfect source. At this point, any source that talks about your group and the discrimination they've faced is a good source to kind of put on the back burner and maybe consider to use. So step 3 and 4 are really finding the sources and working on writing assignment 4, which is the annotated bibliography. Here is what an annotated bibliography is. This is just directly copied from the prompt. And I'm not going to read it out because you should have already read this, or you can pause and read it to yourself. But I just want to underscore that it's not a traditional essay. It's a list of sources, and each source has a short paragraph summary and commentary for that source. So writing assignment 4, you need to find 8 sources and you need to read the source. And then what you'll be turning in is a list of the sources you've read with, again, that 1 to 2 paragraph summary or analysis. So all along the way, as you're finding these sources, you're working on writing assignment 4, the annotated bibliography, you want to be researching with the paper, writing assignment 5, in mind, because that's the ultimate goal. Writing assignment 4 is just a stepping stone to help us get to writing assignment 5. So research with writing assignment 5 in mind. I recommend that you create a log to keep track of all these sources, because you'll find that you find many right away and you want to make sure you're able to save them. One suggestion I often have is to use index cards to keep a log of the source. In the research overview video you'll watch later, I'll show you how to save the sources online, so feel free to do that instead if you don't want to do a hard copy log. Now, once writing assignment 4 is done and submitted, or even as you're still working on writing assignment 4, you're going to move to step 5, which is starting to draft the essay and work on our final essay for the semester. And there are 2 parts to the essay. The first part is researching the problem, and that's where you will write about the different forms of discrimination this group faces. Perhaps they experience stereotyping, perhaps they experience intolerance or hate crimes or things like that. Kind of want to review a historical overview a little bit and then talk about these different forms of discrimination. This is kind of the depressing part of the paper, if we're being honest, but it's important to outline the problem before we get to the solution, which is the second part of the essay. So the solution is where you will write about approaches that help combat that discrimination. So just a note here, as it says at the bottom, don't get too focused on solving discrimination or marginalization. That is a huge task that you or I really cannot do. So instead, focus on finding what other people have done or coming up with your own too. Suggestions of ways to help decrease or limit discrimination. So like I said earlier, a really common one is increased awareness, perhaps through students learning about this group in school or nonprofits starting social media campaigns. Whatever it is, you don't have to necessarily solve discrimination. We're more looking for approaches that help minimize the discrimination. So finally, an outline has been posted to Canvas. Some students like to use this outline, and it's not like outlines in the past that are kind of blank and you fill in. This is more what you should include in each section of the essay. So it's pretty thorough. Some find it really helpful in steps 3, 4, or 5 while you're researching, gathering sources, and of course when you're writing. But some find it a little overwhelming at this stage because, like I said, it has a lot of information in it. So check it out if you'd like, but also feel free to wait until after spring break if you don't want to get kind of too overwhelmed with all the information you need to find. All right, well, we've made it to the end. Thank you guys for watching. Feel free to re-watch the video throughout your project at the end of the semester to help clarify the scope of the assignment. As proof of watching, you can get extra credit for posting a question in the research Q&A discussion board, not the general one, but the one that's geared towards writing assignment 4 and 5, just like last time. This can be a question you have or a question you think others may have. If you post, you will get extra credit. Thank you guys again, and I'll see you on Canvas.